Hello, this is Joe Glines, and we're continuing these interviews with AutoHotkey users and experts. And in this case, I'm talking to Mitch Berry. Mitch, I was looking through my emails, and because I was trying to remember, I know we had exchanged emails for a while, but I think I saw it was like at the end of 2016. I think you had reached out at some point, and actually, I remember because when I was searching through my email, I think it said like, yeah, Mr. Glines, this may come to you as like the most random email in the world or something, and it made me laugh. I'm like, no, I get a lot of just people saying, hey, how do I do this? Which I love helping people, right, and getting more people to use AutoHotkey. We were chatting a bit before we started, and I know you share that passion of like, I wish more people used AutoHotkey. Can you go ahead and give us a little bit of a background of your like education and work history?
Well, right now I work for Basin Electric Power Cooperative. I actually work for a subsidiary of them named Dakota Gasification Company. And Basin at large is about 2,300 employees. We have facilities in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, so kind of all over in the upper Midwest. And I've been with the company for 10 years. My role is the planner for the electrical instrumentation department, but I sort of double or moonlight. It's not my official title, but I do some duties that would be more on the business systems analyst side and help support some of the internal software applications that we have. And in doing that, I got turned on to AutoHotkey. I actually ran across your profile on LinkedIn originally, I think, and sort of started out with just trying to do some very rudimentary data entry type automation where there was no DOM, there was no COM. It was basically just click coordinates and send commands pretty much. And then I've evolved since then. As far as background educationally, I have an Associate of Applied Science from Bismarck State College and was in the technical field on the electrical instrumentation side before I came into management. So in this role, I've learned, I've learned some JavaScript, I've learned SQL. I am still on the trajectory of learning AutoHotkey, but that's all self-taught. I haven't had any formal education in programming.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, I want to take a short step back because I love the way you phrased it of you started off sending keystrokes, basically set, and then you evolved into using COM and other things. And it's one of those things, like I tell people, I do my best not to send keystrokes anymore, but sometimes it is sometimes it's either the right approach because it's really fast. You can write the script in a minute, right? But sometimes it actually works reliably enough, and so I'll still do it. But there are definitely better not better. Yeah, it depends on the thing. I guess it depends how frequently you're going to use it, right? That there are other ways to connect to something that are more reliable and consistent, and also don't take the focus away from your computer, which that's one also where when you're sending keystrokes, you gotta, usually let go of the keyboard and mouse and not monkey with it. But yeah, and actually I was going to give myself a short plug there is like, on LinkedIn, anyone listen to this, connect with me. I'm sure I'm the only Joe Glines out there, but you'll see I'm an AutoHotkey advocate, and I'm trying to connect with as many people, mainly just because I want to get people using AutoHotkey. It's one of those things, I think a lot of people actually use it, but very few list it in your profile on LinkedIn. And sadly, it's actually one of my questions I was going to talk to you about later, which we can actually, again, this is dynamic, right? It's, why don't supervisors look to hire people who have, some sort of automation type skill, whether it's AutoHotkey or anything, right? It seems like they should. I understand, not many people actually use AutoHotkey or are trying to automate things, but as a boss overseeing people, I would think you'd want to hire people that are more efficient. And how do your supervisors look at it?
Well, I'll comment on that, and then I'll answer your question.
Sure.
There's kind of three layers there, in my opinion, that have to be gone through. And the first and the foremost is that it's been my experience, although I don't know if this is true nationwide, but it's been my experience that very few people even know that something like this exists, that AutoHotkey is even a thing.
I agree.
And so the first layer was to introduce the notion that, hey, you realize that you don't need a human to do every mundane manual step of the process. The second layer that has to be gotten through then is the fear that organizations have of installing a open license or a freeware piece of software on their corporate network, right?
Yeah.
And then the third thing is then their concerns about how you use it and their immediate allergic reaction as to thinking, well, is it going to bypass any of the steps or any of the securities that you would have to go through if you were doing manual data entry? And once you can get through those three things, because that's going to depend on the application that you're using it with, right? So once you can get through those three things, which I was very fortunate that we have very forward-thinking people in our IS&T group at headquarters, and one of them in particular who's in charge of this type of thing was like, yeah, go for it. And, I give you the blessing to do it. And I did it. And we've literally hit a home run with AutoHotkey. A quick example, we just went through from 2016 until just recently, the beginning of this year, we were going through a major capital project at my facility where we literally built an entire new addition to our plant. And there was thousands of catalog stores items that needed to be added to our corporate software system, which I'll get to in a minute, and many thousands of assets that needed to be added. And we were receiving that information from disparate sources, from contractors, from internal people compiling it on spreadsheets, from whatever. And I remember earlier on in my career here, we went through another project like this in another area, and they pulled, if I remember right, they must have pulled 5 or 7 people to put them on the special duty of entering data, and it was like over a period of almost a year, and it still is not all the way complete. We've been using AutoHotkey for the current project, or I have, and we are currently in that new unit, we are 83% complete with all of the asset and catalog entry, which in the reliability world is considered world-class. So we don't have any other units out here, any other areas that can claim that, and that's solely a result of using AutoHotkey.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. The other ones I would throw on top of that, but I think you're right. You got to get past some of the misgivings by management of it. But then there's also often this feeling of, hey, it's going to cost a lot of money or time or both to actually automate something, right? And that's where I've demonstrated, like, it's a couple of hours. It's not hundreds of hours. And the software in this case is free.
Yes. And there's also the element of, and it's a lot of this is, of course, dependent upon what exactly you're doing. But yeah, there's a trade-off. If you're doing a one-off thing, does it pay to automate it? Are you going to be able to reuse that program? Is it something that's going to happen a lot? But if it's not, then maybe you just want to do it regular. But if it is, then you can. I save all my scripts, and so they can be reused or edited or whatever to fulfill different needs.
Adapted. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I would add to that, because that's what I had the same feeling, and I still do. I mean, obviously you're right. But it's what I didn't realize was, even though I think something's a one-off thing, the overall concept or the technology I'm trying to do actually presents itself a lot, pretty frequently. Even though it seems like it's a one-off thing, I realized after I would automate something, like, wait a minute, I actually did something just like this, in this script, and I would borrow and tweak it. And so I got to the point where I'm like, almost everything I did, it was like, it's never a one-off thing. It may feel like it, but boy, more often than not, little part in it. And here's the other thing is, some people look at a thing and say, like you mentioned earlier, like taking something from one source and transferring it to the other, and you have to do something between there. It's all these steps, right? Well, with AutoHotkey, that's what I love about it. You don't have to automate the entire process, right? I might just automate one part of that process, right? And say like, well, this one I can write a script in 5 minutes that will help me do this little bit, and I'll leave it at that, right? And then typically what I did was I would go back to it next time it came up, and I would then say, okay, I'm going to add a little bit more of automation to it, or add some more logic to it or something to troubleshoot things. And just slowly, I never tried to automate everything entirely from the first time, because it would take a lot of time and I wouldn't get my work done.
Right. I do the same thing. I have used it to automate stages of the work, and then sort of evaluate. And the other thing is, in my case, there's been some instances where you have difficulty maybe grabbing all of the data that you need, especially if the sources are from they're disparate or whoever they're coming from.
Yep.
A lot of things in AutoHotkey are helpful, but one of the most helpful things in AutoHotkey is the message box, because it kind of is like a default pause in your script. So if I'm grabbing a bunch of data and I'm only automating part of this, I can get to a stage in the script where I pop up a message box and it displays everything that it's captured so far, and then it's an okay or a no or whatever to check it before moving on.
Right. Yeah. Basically, like, especially in something like that where it's inside of a loop, that, like you said, you want it. That's the thing I love doing is I will always have a human interaction when I especially like you described. That's a often very common use for me for AutoHotkey is I need to get something from one program or website or whatever to another data source, and there's no back end system that automates doing it, and so I'll use either web scraping or whatever, connecting to an Excel file or even a database, or sending controls to go grab and copy whatever program you're in, and then switch to the other program and usually paste it or fill out the form or whatever. But then I have either a message box or something to allow me to basically sign off and say, yeah, it's good, right? And that's what I tell people, like, look, I think it is a big concern, and it often it's not a bad concern to say, are we going to get a lot of junk in our data? And I'm like, hey, you still have the human doing it. It just really speeds up the process. How about, so at your work, are you the only person programming in AutoHotkey?
Yes. There's nobody else in the cooperative who has this program installed. And as a matter of fact, most of us in the company, we have a docking station, and then we have our laptop we can take anywhere. I have that, and then I have a second PC in my office that a lot of times is used for dedicated running script.
Yeah. And I'm curious, have you had any colleagues or anybody show any interest in learning some of it?
Oh yeah, there are a few people that are interested in that and in learning it, but we're at the stage right now that it's not everybody in management understands what we've been doing, and because of some of the other corporate activities that we have going on right now, it's deprioritized. It's one of those things. Well, hey, if we need to get this done like this, then have Mitch do it, kind of a thing. At some point, we're going when we get through some of our other activities, then we definitely need to look at expanding the use of this program to other people who have shown interest, and there have been a few. There's been about 3 or 4 people who have expressed, hey, I could do this or I could do that. And it's like, yeah, that you could. We just have to get the buy off.
Yeah. Well, and so in that case, do you think when they say we could do this, do you think they actually want to learn how to program it, or they want you to do it for them?
No, I think they want to learn how to do it.
Okay.
I don't know if I don't know how deep they want to go, or if they're looking at it superficially, like they have a few tasks in mind that they would like to be able to automate, and they just want to learn it to a limited extent. or if they want to dive deep, I don't know, but they definitely want to understand how it works, and at least the ability to write basic programs.
And if someone came, well, actually, let's say you're at a dinner party and someone was asking something about automation, like how would you explain AutoHotkey to them, how you use it? Like what are the biggest benefits?
Well, going back to the part about concerns of management and overriding system permissions and what it does, basically what I say is that AutoHotkey is a tool that enables you to do things that a human would do minus the human. And that's the very basic explanation that I give. And when if we go any deeper than that, I just say basically, look, it's not difficult. There are some people who maybe want to learn it or dive into it and maybe are a little bit intimidated by how in depth it goes. I know in the beginning I was intimidated by COM and DOM and stuff like that. I thought, I'll never wrap my head around that. I'm just gonna send keystrokes. But ultimately, once you start, it's a trajectory, right? Once you start doing things just very basically, even if it's just sending keystrokes or whatever, and you sit back and you watch your machine work, you're like, hey, I wonder if I could do this even better or even faster. And in a way, it kind of becomes an addiction. So you're looking, you're always looking for a way to make it happen faster, better, more accurately, whatever the case may be. And so it comes by default, right? It's nothing to be intimidated about. And I'll tell you what, I don't have a programming education background, but I'm one of the best copy and paste programmers there is. And I go on the internet and I'll find something that works or that I can, replace a few things in there and make it work for my application. And hey, I'm off to the races.
I felt guilty for the first couple of years of doing that, and I would tell, and I'm like, but the more I talk to programmers, they're like, nobody writes stuff from scratch, right? Everybody borrows. Why would you? If there's stuff out there that already gets you, 90% of the way there, why would you write from scratch, right? Go ahead and borrow and tweak. It's perfectly acceptable and is the standard. And it took me a while to really get that, but now I'm like, okay, I'm okay with it now. I don't get embarrassed when I say it, but because I agree. Why would you rewrite something that someone's already done? Now, having said that, the one thing I'll do even when people will say, hey, how do you do this? Where I have my clip, what's it called? Not clip share, but for screen clipping tool. Right. And some people are like, oh, I use this tool, right? Or pasting plain text, which is another basic one. And like, oh, actually I have this tool that is it. Well, even if people will come up with a simple tool that it does what I need, often I'll still see if I can do an AutoHotkey, not because I think their tool is not good enough. It's because once I've created an AutoHotkey, I can tweak it exactly how I want it. And that's the thing I love about AutoHotkey is I can make the hotkeys, the triggers for it and what it is be intuitive to myself and how I think. And that's one thing I love about AutoHotkey.
I agree with that.
Can you, are there any other examples you can talk to of how you use AutoHotkey at work, or some real examples? I believe when I was looking at my emails, I think you had done some stuff with Excel. Is that right?
Yep, and my first experience with Excel was, again, it was basically the win activate and then whatever the name of the Excel file is that I had, and then I was using left Control C, and assigning variables to everything, and then manually going down to the next row and then saving all those variables and opening up our software application, which I said earlier in the talk I was going to mention. It's called Asset Suite, and it's a CMMS, a cooperative CMMS, a computerized materials management system. It's also our work management system, and it's ABB is the owner of that software now. Used to be Ventex. The current iteration that we're on is the software engine for it is COBOL, which is language that comes out of 1959. I think it was developed by the U.S. Navy or something like that. And the next version that's version 8 that we're on. The next version that we get to, which will be version 9, is modernized, and that has all of the COBOL transcoded to JavaScript at runtime. So that'll be a little bit different and easier to deal with. The stuff right now, it does run inside of Internet Explorer. It's an application that runs inside of IE, but there are some strange behaviors that it has, and I think I've even been in touch with you on one of them. And in particular, there are grids in this software, and when you try to write data to a grid, it's a HTML type of span is what it is, but for some reason when you try to write directly to a grid, it'll write it, but then when you exit that screen and come back, it won't be there anymore.
Yeah, okay.
So the only for those, I have to do some different workarounds. I have to aim at like an input field and then tab over to the grid, and then it works. But otherwise, everything else works. Input fields work, and panel navigation works. All that stuff works the same way that it works on any web page. But just those grids don't work. I'm sorry, I kind of segued there. I lost my train of thought. You were talking about examples, and
yep.
Examples are, we have a process of creating stores item or catalog items in our system that requires normally, depending on how complicated the item is, it takes about 5 to 7 different panels or different screens that you have to visit to get that done. So it's incredibly time consuming. Automating that and then allowing that to run on my second PC, I don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
That can be doing something while I'm doing my other work. Another example is data cleanup. When I can write, for example, I can write an SQL query against our database, and I can pull out a bunch of data and then export it to Excel. I can have AutoHotkey examine everything in there, and then I can have it also fix it or standardize it based on what I'm looking for. I can tell it what to do, and then I can have it re-input that back into Asset Suite so that the data is now clean.
Yeah, cool.
An example of that, a real quick example of that might be dates. A lot of dates that we have are junk that come out because they're in strings and they shouldn't be in strings.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So we can fix that kind of thing.
Are you using regular expressions on that?
Yes.
Awesome. Good. So I was just saying, because it's amazing. Even when I talk to programmers, there's a lot of programmers who are not only don't use them, but aren't even aware of them. Right. And it's one of those, it's a learning curve, right? It's not something you step into and tomorrow you know them, because man, even when you know them well, I've gotten to the point where I got decent at them and then I don't use it for a month and then I'm like not back to square one, but it takes me a while to get back into them, but they are incredibly useful for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right now, overall, as far as using it for our CMMS, it's, a lot of the scripts that I've written are, they're document object models, but I'm looking forward to when we upgrade to version 9, because version 9 being in JavaScript, I believe that COM might be better for that.
Hopefully. Yeah. It probably would be, right? I would be my guess.
I think so too, but we'll see. We'll see when we get that far.
Yeah. And then I'm curious, do you use it at all in your personal life? Do you use like hot strings for anything?
Not really. At home, I don't really use it that much, except for messing around, right? And maybe getting some ideas. Like I might, before work in the morning, while I'm having my coffee, I might sit online, and I don't know if you know this, but there's kind of I don't know if it's a Steam game or what it is, but you've heard of that website, that Cookie Clicker? You ever heard of that?
No.
So that if you Google cookie clicker and then you go to the, it's like I think the website is Ortile or something like that. It'll be like one of the first things that pops up. But anyway, that's a fantastic website to mess around with AutoHotkey scripts, right? As kind of just a training exercise or a brain game or whatever. So I'll just sometimes sit there in the morning and be like, okay, I want to examine this number on the page and that number on the page. And if that number is greater, I want it to do this and click here, but I don't want to send keystrokes. I want to have it look at I want to have it look at the object and do that. And it's because there's nothing at stake. So it's low stress and you learn things, you pick things up along the way.
Cool. Yeah, I have one. I don't know if you've ever used it, but I'm trying to remember where I have it. But it's a page specifically built to help teach people about the DOM, and so it has one element will have an ID, the next but like no class name, no name, and then one will have the class name, but in this and it'll have different ways where you're supposed to connect to them or find the elements and stuff, and it's a good one for practicing on.
Yours might be. If I'm thinking of the right one, I may have used yours because I think that's how I started experimenting with frames in IE. Do you have a module on there that talks about frames?
It might have. I'm trying to remember. I thought I had a bookmark right here, but web scraping example and I clicked it, but it's not pulling up the page that I remember. So
I'm sure that it was because I remember your web scraping tutorial thing, and I'm pretty sure there was a section in there in dealing with frames.
Oh, there was in that. Yeah, I just don't recall. In that one, if I remember correctly, I used the WW3 page, which had 3 frames, and I was demonstrating on that. But yeah, frames. It was interesting. I interviewed Tank yesterday, and he's been on the forum and he's an admin there, but he's been working a long time with web scraping. I mean, he has a background. He still is not a programmer either, but he has a background in more dealing with JavaScript and stuff. And yesterday the subject came up, and he's like, "Hey, frames are even tough for him. They can be." So I felt much better at like going, yeah, because I've gotten a lot better at it, but boy, frames can still be a headache.
Yeah, they definitely can be. They're definitely a challenge even now. It depends especially when you're getting into something in our application where you've never been to before, a module you've never been into, and then the frames are all different and layered differently. It's a challenge. It's probably one of the more challenging aspects of it, even more so than DOM and COM, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I agree with that. And I would say it's because often, unless you realize you need to even find it, right, that like you can waste so many hours. Because that's actually one of the things people will write me, and the very first thing is like, hey, I'm following tutorials and I'm trying to get something from the page, but I keep getting nothing. And I'll basically say like, look at this, and do you see frames? And most of the time they're like, oh yeah, I see frames. I'm like, yeah, all right, well, you got your work cut out for you, because it's not going to be easy.
Exactly right. These frames can be a pain.
Yeah. Cool. Well, and I don't remember. Have you attended our webinars?
I haven't been able to attend a webinar yet because the timing has always never worked out with work or whatever.
Yeah, that's why we record them. I mean, we know, right?
Yep. Today it was very lucky, and especially because it's a Monday. Normally Monday mornings are pretty rough, but today is actually pretty slow.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I think we can wrap this up.
No, I guess my closing thoughts would, be that I wish that, and I'm glad that there's folks like you out there, and that there's forums like the AutoHotkey board that will make this a little bit more, I hate to use the word mainstream, but maybe more well exposed. Yeah. My organization is aware of it now as we move forward in our we're doing some restructuring internally too. And as we do that, I'm hoping to kind of elevate this to the top of the awareness list, so we can leverage it even more corporate wide and have some more people that are able to write it. But yeah, the resources that you've put out there, and both yourself and what's on the forum are absolutely invaluable. It's
yeah,
for people like me.
Yeah, I agree. I was telling Tank that today, I am so grateful for all the people on the forum, because I don't know how they, stick with it for so long, of helping people, especially new people who I remember writing you, and you were willing to invest in time and actually, work on it. Where some people, they ask the craziest questions and they don't want to they just want you to do it for them. Right. And I'm like, I'm a big believer in teaching someone how to fish, not catching the fish and giving it to them. Right. And so yeah.
I generally will try. My approach generally, it's not always the case, but my approach generally is to make an attempt at it and then get some errors or have it not work, and then maybe try a couple of other things. And then when I post my message, I'll say, well, look, I did this and I tried this and now I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And at least that way there's an investment in it before I just say, hey, do this for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, posting your relevant code is helpful in saying, explaining. I was telling Charlie, someone told me a while ago, I forget who it was, but they said, a short question requires a long answer, and a long question requires a short answer. And so, if you do your homework and explain, clearly with the relevant data, this is what I'm trying to do, especially if it's like a web page that I can access. Here's the link and here's what I'm trying to get. You're much more likely to not only get people that want to help you, but they'll be able to help you, specifically and faster. So yeah, I highly encourage people to think a lot before you actually post a question. Especially, we were talking the other day, like, pretend like it's the bobblehead doll and you're talking to somebody else. And if you were to ask the person sitting next to you this question, right, or they asked you, right, would it make sense to you? Because often you're leaving things out that you think are implied or clear, and yet when it's from someone else's context, you're like, I can't even begin to comment because I don't understand, everything else that you have thought was part of the conversation in your head.
No, right. And that's a good rule for, that's a separate topic, of course, but that's a good rule for life in general, is just, think about what you're asking before you ask it.
Yep. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again for taking the time. And
hey, you're very welcome.
Keep at it. Keep, pushing the envelope and learning more. I still am, right? There's so much AutoHotkey can do. It's amazing. And it's a never ending process. The other thing I realized was, you start, as you learn more, which is, I think, one of the reasons why you need to learn more, is that you start seeing other things that you didn't even realize you could automate, right? And it's amazing. I think I've overlooked stuff where I'm like, I don't know why I never thought of this, right? I do it all the time, and it never even crossed my mind that it's something I could automate. Yeah.
That happens all the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again. Have an awesome day.
Hey, you too. Thank you.